In this training, you will learn how to properly perform scaffold chain lining operations. Failure to properly chain materials can result in dropped objects or physical overexertion, causing serious injuries. That is why mechanical means of passing is always the preferred method, although in some situations may not be feasible. In order to safely carry out chain lining operations, it is extremely important that pre-job planning, job setup, handling, and communication are done correctly. Handling and passing materials may seem like a straightforward task and something you've done many times before, but in order to complete the task safely, we will show you the proper techniques that have been developed and tested to work best and meet Brand Safeway's high standard of safety. Prior to any scaffold erection or dismantle job, a job safety plan, JSP, or other similar safe work plan will be performed and include all members of the crew involved in the task. Working together, the crew leaders and employees shall identify all hazards related to their work, with special emphasis on the proper setup and execution of the chain line used to pass materials. Be sure to discuss the specific responsibilities of each crew member. This step is crucial to minimize the risk of incidents and injuries. When determining how the chain line will be set up, give consideration to the experience level of each crew member. Stagger tenured employees and employees with less experience to create a safer and more efficient chain line. If you'll be working from or erecting a cantilever scaffold, ensure the cantilever scaffold section of the JSP is completed, and any additional steps that come along with work from cantilever scaffold are followed. A clear system of communication must be developed prior to chaining equipment. Before you begin, discuss the method of communication to be used to indicate when a crew member has control over a component. For example, the twisting method. You must also establish the best method of communication to be used to stop the chaining of equipment if the chain is moving too fast or in the event of an emergency. Depending on your work environment, this may include visual and verbal signals. Ensure each crew member is properly trained on the communication methods you'll be using before setting up the chain line. At the end of the meeting, every member of the crew must sign the JSP. All personnel involved in the chaining of materials must be protected from fall hazards 100% of the time. Workers at height involved in the chaining of materials also require 100% tie-off. Crew members must be equipped with the proper PPE or personal protective equipment according to the JSP. Give consideration to the appropriate type of gloves to be used based on the task and weather conditions, as well as which type of eye protection would be best suited for the work environment. When building a scaffold, barricade off the entire work area using high visibility barricade tape and attach tags to note the activity taking place, hazards inside the taped area, and the Brand Safeway contact name and number. As the build gets higher, ensure the area beneath the erection or dismantle operation is barricaded off large enough so that a dropped or deflected object cannot contact someone outside the work area. If there are staircases or ladders within the barricaded area, make sure they are blocked off with tape as well to prevent someone from mistakenly entering through these access points. Secure netting, plywood, or fencing on elevated work platforms to prevent dropped objects where equipment is staged or stored briefly. Whichever method being utilized must be adequate enough to prevent materials from falling. Confirm that all process-sensitive equipment is protected from items that could fall from above. When passing materials in a chain line, the working platform for the passing lanes must be a minimum of 18 inches wide, the equivalent of 2 planks or 1 Mac deck, or 20 inches wide if the work is taking place in California. Always ensure that the deck area where a material handler is standing is kept free of debris and other materials to allow for safe movement about the deck. When setting up a chain, position the crew in a staggered line so that no worker is directly above or below another worker. Pay special attention to the ground personnel. Ensure they're out of the line of fire or have overhead protection, for example, additional exclusion zones. Ask yourself, if an object were dropped, am I in the line of fire? If the answer to this question is yes, you need to adjust the chain line. For passing on scaffolds with either a narrow or wide configuration, remove the outermost plank of the deck area so that components can be passed inside the frame or bay. If passing inside the frame or bay is not practical because of the length of material, then passing on the outside of the frame or bay may be permitted after a plan has been discussed with the approved competent person. For narrow structures, workers can be placed in a vertical line and pass components inside the frame or bay. Workers still must be staggered front to back under a fully decked platform, minus one board or plank. However, this can only be done when there is 100% overhead protection and the employee is 100% tied off. It is important to keep your hands and head inside the structure and protected within the deck above at all times. Never extend your head outside of the structure to look above or rest any part of your body on the rails in the passing lane to prevent injuries from potential dropped objects. During chaining operations, a crew member should be positioned on each deck, or no greater than 7 feet apart. Do not double pass. All scaffold material must be passed hand to hand. Never toss, drop, or swing materials to another worker at any time. Always keep 2 hands on the material as you pass, and use hand-over-hand handling. Never allow materials to slide between your hands. You do not have full control when sliding material, and doing so could result in cuts from sharp edges or slivers and splinters from wooden planks. It is important not to hold scaffold components only by their connectors while passing. Not holding scaffold components by their connectors ensures you have both hands on the equipment and the weight is evenly distributed, which allows for a better grip when passing materials. Never pass materials with attached components such as clamps still attached to braces. Holding components by their ends increases the weight of the material and affects your ability to pass the equipment safely. The same rule applies when passing wood or metal planks. An extra precaution should be taken. Wood planks can become excessively slick and heavy when wet, and metal plank surfaces can become slippery when wet or coated with contaminants. Use appropriate gloves in wet weather conditions when erecting, dismantling, or modifying scaffold. Always remove wire-exposed nails and any other sharp objects before chaining material. The chosen method to be used to indicate when a crew member has control of a component is the twisting method, along with the verbal shout. When receiving material in the chain line, always give a gentle twist to the scaffold material and confirm verbally, "I got it," to indicate you have control of the material. Only then should a crew member at the other end of the component let go. Tactile communication is imperative, as verbal communication by itself can be misconstrued by any person in the chain line, especially in noisy areas, resulting in a crew member releasing a component or part which could fall below. When building or removing scaffold while wearing respiratory protection, verbal communication cannot and must not be attempted. Utilize the twisting method with confirmation or tugging to ensure the safe passing of material. If using a rope to raise or lower components, always inspect ropes before usage. Use appropriate and approved hitches to hoist. Never tie on more than 2 ledgers, standards, or braces at any time. Bags should only be used for items that fit properly inside and should not be used for long scaffold components. Other safe practices include laying material down flat. Do not stand or lean scaffold materials. If there is an emergency and you must quickly evacuate the area, the material could be dislodged and fall, striking a person or damaging process-sensitive equipment. Leaning components can also fall and strike workers directly below or bounce off platforms to levels below. Make sure all material has been removed from scaffold decks or platforms before the crew takes break or lunch. Loose material can be shaken off decks while climbing up or down the ladders. Never store material above the toe board unless a hard barricade is in place to prevent material from falling. Remember, all intermediate decking used to pass equipment shall be removed at the completion of the scaffold erection. Never remove any scaffold material in areas other than those designated by the competent person without their approval, and use a pre-dismantle checklist where required by our policy. When dismantling a scaffold, always maintain control of the material. Your hand should remain on the material while being unfastened. Once material is removed, it will be passed down in an orderly fashion. The workers on the ground are to properly stage, stack, and rack components as they come down. When dismantling, never remove more material than can be passed down at one time, and do not stack materials on the deck as they can easily be kicked off to the ground below. If material is coming down too fast, the chance of an incident is at its greatest point. Stop the chain using your predetermined communication method and do not resume work until safe to do so. Remember that the chain line is only as good as its weakest link. Remember, if there is a delay at any point in the chain, it is important that workers ahead of the delay stop the work until the pace is recovered. Continually monitor the chain line for signs of fatigue. Using the predetermined method of communication, stop the chain and substitute workers where needed to prevent fatigue-related incidents or injuries. When available, utilize a chain line monitor to supervise passing. If at any point you see a worker performing a task that is unsafe or does not comply with the methods described in this video, it is your obligation to intervene. Stop the work immediately, notify a supervisor, and address and correct the situation. Once the issue is addressed, only then may work resume. To recap, start by meeting with your crew to prepare a JSP and identify hazards before beginning the work. Make sure everyone in the crew is equipped with the proper PPE and trained on the predetermined communication methods for passing and stopping the chain line. When setting up a chain, position the crew in a horizontal staggered line or a vertical line with 100% overhead protection. Always keep 2 hands on the material as you pass and use hand-over-hand handling. Use the twisting method along with verbal confirmation to indicate when a crew member has control of the component. If there is a delay at any point in the chain, stop the work until the pace is recovered. And if at any point you see something that is unsafe, stop the work immediately and notify a supervisor. Always keep it foremost in your mind that unsafe material handling practices have the potential to cause serious injury or even death. You must always remain focused on the passing task. Now that you've been trained on the safe chaining of materials, it is your duty to take what you've learned and apply it every time you're involved in material handling activities, because you own safety.